समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Hello and welcome to ThePrint. This is Bidisha and you're watching Economics. Today is the sixth state I am putting under the microscope. We at ThePrint have done this deep dive into Maharashtra, Karnataka, West Bengal, Kerala and Tamil Nadu so far. And every single time I've presented my analytical findings at a round table, in a policy dialogue or a podcast, someone in the room asks me, what about Punjab? And every time you think of Punjab, you think of one indicator: high debt. As if that one indicator explains everything. Everyone already knows Punjab is in debt. So today, let's go past that headline. I'll show you why the real story of Punjab's decline is not what you think. If you drive through rural Punjab today, you will see three things sitting together that don't belong in the same frame: a farmer's field that's been mortgaged to the bank, a tube well running on electricity nobody pays for and nobody can switch off, and a house with almost no young people left in it because the family sold their land to send their son to Canada instead of buying a new tractor. 30 years ago, we would have blamed Punjab's troubles on the militancy, the armed insurgency the state went through in the 1980s and early 1990s. That's the easy explanation everyone reaches out for. But when you actually look at the numbers, that story falls apart. And that's what I want to show you today with 4 charts step by step. Chart 1, the timing problem. Now let's begin here. This chart on your screen tracks Punjab's income per person compared to the national average from 1960 all the way to today. 100 on this chart means Punjab is exactly average. Above 100 means Punjab is richer than the average Indian state. Now look at what happens. In 1960, Punjab is already above average at about 120. By 1970, thanks to the Green Revolution, the introduction of high-yield seeds and guaranteed government purchase of wheat and rice, Punjab shoots up to 169. It's nearly 70% richer than the average state. Now here's the important part. The militancy runs through the 1980s into the early 1990s. And during all of that, right through the violence, Punjab's income barely moves. It's still around 146% of the national average in the year 2000, a full decade after the violence ended. The fall continues right up to the most recent estimate, where Punjab sits at about 105, barely above the national average at all. Now the question is, why does this matter? Because if the militancy had caused this decline, you would expect the damage to show up during the militancy or just right after it. Instead, Punjab keeps humming along fine for a decade of peace and then falls off a cliff. Now, that timing tells you that this isn't a security story. It's something that happened afterward in peacetime. And look at Haryana on the same chart. It is carved out of the same original state going through the same unstable years. Haryana keeps climbing all the way up to 180 today, same starting point, same disturbed neighborhood, completely different ending. Now that's not something militancy can explain either. Now there's an idea in economics called the convergence theory. This was developed by economists like Robert Solow and later built on by Robert Barrow and Xavier Martin. In plain terms, it simply says that if a place gets a lucky one-time boost, like Punjab did with the Green Revolution, that boost fades unless the place keeps reinvesting it. It keeps building new factories, training people, diversifying what it produces. Otherwise, it just drifts back down to the average. Now, that's exactly what happened. Punjab spent its lucky break instead of reinvesting it. Haryana reinvested. That's the whole difference between the two lines. And that brings us to the second familiar chart, the debt trap. So, if it's not militancy, then my question is, what exactly happened? This is where it gets interesting, and this is where you see the debt chart. This shows how much each state owes as a share of its own economy from 2022 to 2026. Punjab, that's the red line at the top, owes about 45% of everything it produces in a year. That is the highest of any major Indian state. Compare that to Maharashtra at the bottom, which owes only about 20%. Now, here's a simple rule of finance, which was first laid out by economist named F.C. Domar back in 1944. It says that a government's debt burden stays under control only if its economy grows faster than the interest rate it's paying on its loans. If growth doesn't outpace interest, the debt just keeps piling up on autopilot, not because anyone is doing anything wrong today, but because interest compounds every single year regardless. Look at Punjab's line. It barely moves over 5 years, 46.8% down to 45.1. Now, that flatness is not really a success story. It means the debt is being fed just enough to keep it from growing, but it's never actually being paid down. Punjab's annual shortfall between what it spends and what it earns went from about 544 crore rupees in 1990 to 24,588 crore rupees by 2022, a five-fold jump even after accounting for inflation. And here's what makes it worse. When a government borrows money, it can spend that money in two very different ways. It can spend it on revenue expenditure, that means salaries, pensions, interest payments, subsidies, money that is gone the moment it is spent and builds nothing for the future. Or it can spend on capital expenditure. That means roads, power plants, irrigation, spending that actually grows the economy and helps pay the debt back later. Now, here's how stark the imbalance is in Punjab's latest budget. For every 1 rupee that goes into capital expenditure, the future building kind, about 8 rupees goes into revenue expenditure. The kind that's gone the moment it is being spent on salaries, on pensions, on interest and subsidies. 8 rupees of consumption for every 1 rupee of investment. And interest payments alone eat up nearly a quarter of everything the state earns in a year. That's the mortgaged field from the opening picture I gave you, but at the scale of an entire government. And that brings us to chart 3, the free water problem. Now the question is, why can't Punjab just stop this? Why does the spending keep flowing the same way year after year? This chart on your screen on groundwater explains one big piece of it. On the left, you see how much water Punjab is pulling out of the ground every year compared to how much can be sustainably replaced. 100% is the safe limit. In 2023, Punjab was pulling out nearly 164%, well over safe levels. By 2025, that's eased slightly to 156%, mostly because canals were repaired, not because anything changed in how the water was being used. Now, on the right, you can exactly see the reason why. The number of tube wells, those are the pumps farmers use to draw groundwater, has grown roughly 8-fold since the 1970s, from about 1,90,000 to nearly 1.5 million. Now, the question is, why does nobody stop pumping? Because electricity for agriculture in Punjab is free. There's a famous idea in economics called the tragedy of commons. This was actually first described by an ecologist named Garrett Hardin. It simply means when a resource is shared by everyone and nobody pays the true cost of using it, everybody tends to overuse it because no single person bears the consequence of their own overuse. Free power on groundwater is a textbook case. And Punjab is still spending around 15,200 crore rupees a year subsidizing that electricity, with nearly 8,800 crore of that alone going to agriculture. Now, this connects directly back to the debt problem in the second chart. And there's actually a related idea called distributional coalitions from an economist named Manker Olson. It simply means a group that benefits heavily from a policy, in this case wheat and rice, farmers who benefit from guaranteed government purchase prices and free power. They will fight hard to protect it even if it's costly for everyone else, because the benefit is concentrated on them while the cost is spread thin across the whole state. That's why the system is so hard to change, even when everyone can see the water running out. Now that brings us to chart 4, the money leaving with the people. Now this is the last piece of the puzzle, and this is the empty house from the opening picture that I gave you. This chart shows something quite striking. Punjab is only 2.19% of India's population, but in 2022, Punjab accounted for 60% of all new student visa permits to Canada. And nearly a third, that is 31.6% of everything Indian students spend on Canadian education that year, roughly $3.7 billion, came from this one small state. Now, normally, when people talk about migration, they talk about something called the brain drain. Now, this was a term that you might have heard on and off. This was originally from economists Jagdish Bhagwati and Koichi Hamada. The idea that when your skilled people leave, the country loses out. However, later research, especially by an economist named Michael Clements, showed this loss is often softened because migrants send money back home. Now that's the Kerala story. Families in Kerala have relatives working abroad who send remittances back every month, year after year. But Punjab is the exact opposite pattern. In Punjab, families often sell land or take loans to send their child abroad. What comes back is usually a foreign degree, but not capital. The money leaves with the person instead of flowing back to the person's family. So it isn't just skilled people leaving, it's capital leaving with them, often permanently. So if I would have to summarize the real story in one line, it would be that Punjab's decline isn't about the militancy. It's about 3 quiet, unglamorous failures that reinforce each other: debt that funds consumption instead of growth, a subsidy system that protects one crop while draining the water table, and a form of migration where the money leaves the state for good. Now, none of this needed a single act of violence. It happened through 30 years of ordinary paperwork, loan approval, subsidy bills, visa applications. And that also tells you what fixing it will take. It won't take a security solution. All it'll take is a boring, difficult, politically unpopular set of fiscal reforms, the kind governments always find easiest to postpone. Thank you for watching.